What's up YouTube, this is Demkeys back again with another Unity tutorial. Today we will be learning about collision detection. In Unity we can attach colliders to our game objects. Colliders are used to detect collision between two objects, two or more objects I think. Um, the collision can be for any purpose. For example, if any of you have played FPS games, first person shooter games like say Call of Duty for example, when you shoot a bullet, the bullet collides with the enemy, and that is how the enemy gets damaged or dies or whatever. That is collision detection. um, if you if you're driving a car and the car crashes into something, the reason why that car will stop when it crashes, or it'll get damaged when it crashes, is due to collision detection. There are many such examples, but I hope you get the point. We will be learning how to detect collision in 2D space, but you can apply this same concept to 3D space as well with a few minor changes. Okay, so let's start. I've created a background which is a quad, ground which is again a quad that I just resized, and I added a material to it. So that's the ground is black, and I added a collider as well so that our player will be able to stand on this ground. You'll also notice blue and red materials. These are for the player and enemy. Yes, there is going to be an enemy in this tutorial. I had to put an enemy to demonstrate collision. So let's start by creating our player. Yeah, we should start with that. Let's start by creating our player. I'm going to create a quad, and first of all I'll attach the material to it. Next I need to remove this mesh collider and attach a box collider and a rigid body to the component. Let's see any changes that I need to make. Okay, here's one thing about fixed angle. You must have noticed in the previous, if you watched the previous video, which was on, shit, what was the video about? I think it was on jumping. Just a minute, let me check. Sorry, it was on 2D friction and bouncing. You must have noticed that I checked the fixed angle option for our for the ball in that example. The reason was that whenever the ball or whatever object we are talking about in this case, when the object hits something, it has a tendency to roll. So this our player, sorry, I should have named it player. Yeah, our player is, as you can see, a square. If this player happens to collide with any object at a certain angle, he might actually start to spin, and we don't want that right now. So if you check fixed angle, then the object's angle won't change. In simple terms, you can just say that. It's quite helpful in many cases. Okay, what next? We will create a move script for our player. Okay, so we'll start by creating a move speed variable. It's a public float. So public means that we can change the value from the inspector from the inspector panel. Now I'm not going to explain this because I already explained it in the 2D friction and bouncing Actually, I didn't explain it very well there either. But sorry, I cannot explain this right now because it's kind of hard for me to explain it. So yeah, this is transform.translate just to move the player. What am I supposed to use over here? Vector2 dot right. Yes, vector2 dot right into h. Let's see if this works. I need to change the value to, oh, I think I forgot something. Yes, because I'm using transform.translate, so just so the timing doesn't get messed up and the player doesn't skip frames or anything like that, let's add time.delta time. Now I need to add a speed of, let's say, 20. Too fast. Let's try 10. Yep, that's good. Alright, now what next? Yeah, next we have to create our enemy. Now what I'm going to do here is instead of creating a, a new quad and changing the material and adding the rigid body 2D and box collider 2D and all again, I'm just going to duplicate the player object and make a few changes to it. Now there are a couple of ways that you can duplicate objects. One is, can you right click? Yes, you can right click and click duplicate, or you can select the object and press Ctrl D. I think on a Mac it's going to be Command D. I'm not sure, I haven't used a Mac. So yeah, with Ctrl D or by right clicking and clicking on duplicate, you can duplicate objects. I think copy paste works as well, I'm not sure. So where was I? Yes, I duplicated the object. Now so now we have two player objects. One of them is an enemy, so I'm going to rename it to enemy, and just so we can differentiate, I'm going to set the enemy's color to blue. Now we don't want our enemy to have the same script as a player, because the enemy is just, I'm going to set the enemy to move to the left, just like it's just supposed to move to the left for the sake of the example. So I don't want this script on it. I'm going to create a new script. I'll call it enemy move script. Okay, so first we have to create the move speed variable, and now since we don't need to accept any input from the player, we can directly use transform.translate, and within the translate method for the coordinates, we can set vector2 dot right. There doesn't seem to be a vector2 dot left, so we can use vector2 dot right but minus. That'll work too. Into move speed. Yeah, that happens sometimes. IntelliSense doesn't work. It's okay. I think if you save all your scripts and and exit mono develop and open it up again, then it'll be fine. Let's see if this is working. I'll set the speed to 5. Oh good, it works. It's still a little fast though. I'll set it to 3. Now notice what happened earlier when I pressed play. Okay, notice it right now. See this? This is because of the collision. There's a reason why the objects are not going, well, not passing through each other completely. It's because of the colliders. Well, they're not supposed to go through each other at all, but right now I'm not sure why this is happening. Um, oh, maybe it's because there's force being applied from both the sides. Possibly. I don't know. Um, yes. So what you just saw was collision happening between two objects. That is because of the box colliders attached to both of those objects. Now bear in mind, when you are trying to detect collision, one of the two objects has to have a rigid body component attached to it. If you are working on a 3D game, it should be a rigid body component. If you're working on a 2D game, it should be a rigid body 2D component. But anyhow, for collision detection to work, uh, there has to be a rigid body component attached to the to one of the objects. Let's see what happens if I remove the rigid bodies from both of these components. Sorry, from both of these objects. So now the player and the enemy both don't have rigid body 2D components. Let's see what happens now. There, see? Okay, first of all, you'll notice that the neither of the players came down. That is because there's no rigid body 2D component attached. So neither of the objects have mass, neither do they have gravity. So that's why they are just floating in the air. Transform.translate, however, still works because I haven't removed the transform component from any of these objects. So in order for collision detection to work, for the collision to actually happen, you need one of the objects should have rigid body 2D component attached to it. I'm attaching it to both because I need to, because otherwise one object is going to be in the air and the other will be on the ground. So I'm doing it because I need it, but in order to get in order to actually get collision detection to work, only one of the objects needs to have a rigid body 2D component attached to it. Okay, now I will teach you about three events, uh, three events that I know of, that you should know about when you talk about collision detection. One is on collision enter 2D, another is on collision stay 2D, and the last one is on collision exit 2D. Now because we are uh, developing a 2D game over here, that's why the word 2D is there at the end. But if it's a 3D game, then you don't necessarily have to add 2D over there. In fact, if you add 2D, I don't think it's going to work in a 3D game. Now, what do these functions do? On collision enter 2D. It is an event that is called when, just a minute. Yes, on collision enter 2D is called when one collider makes contact with another object's collider. I'll give you an example. By the way, on collision enter 2D, it takes a parameter which is collision 2D. You can name it whatever you want. Now, to show you that the collision is actually working, I'm going to create a tag, call it enemy, and I'm going to attach that tag to our enemy. Now in the player's move script, I'm going to create an on collision enter 2D function. I think uh, this is pretty much overriding. I'm not creating a function, I'm overriding a function. Please correct me in the comments if I'm saying something wrong here. So yeah, on collision enter 2D, if call, which is our collision 2D variable. By the way, the collision 2D variable in this case, our parameter, is going to hold the value of the object that the collider is attached to. So when our player's collider is colliding with the enemy's collider, then this function and this variable in fact is going to hold the value of the enemy's collider info. And the info could be a lot of things. One of the main things is the game objects info. I'll show you how. If call.gameObject.tag. So here I'm accessing the enemy game objects tag, not accessing, I'm reading the tag, checking if it is enemy or not. If it is enemy, then destroy call.gameObject. So destroy the object that collided with this object. Let's see if it works. There. As you can see, as soon as both the objects collided, our player object checked whether the colliding object has an enemy tag attached to it or not, and then it destroyed the enemy object. This is an example of on collision enter. This is as soon as the colliders touch. Now there is a difference between just touch and continuously touching. When you're talking about continuously touching, then you would use on collision stay. Now to demonstrate the working of this, I'll have to just send a message to the game. I don't know if I said that right, but I'm going to have to use debug.log so it shows up in the console. Where's the console? Oh crap. Excuse me, just a minute. Oh, here it is. Let me attach it to something. Okay, yeah. So, um, here I'm going to get on collision stay 2D to check the game objects tag, and if it happens to be enemy, then debug.log, that is the message that will be sent to the console. That's the message that will show up on the console. Sorry, the message can say anything like is touching enemy. Let's see if that works. I've deselected maximize on play because then the console is not going to show up. the message will be shown here and you might not be able to read it. Notice the console. Oh, oops. Oh, my bad. The object, the object got destroyed before on collision stay 2D could be called. So I'm just going to comment out this line so it doesn't destroy the object as soon as the collision happens. See that? As long as both the objects are touching, it's going to show. See this? So far I've got 400 and increasing 500. Now it's 600. So it's constantly touching, and that's why it's going on giving me uh, the messages. I think it's sending messages for each frame, and it's a certain number of frames per second. I'm not sure what the number is in Unity, uh, but yeah, you can see how on collision stay 2D works. Now I'll show you on collision exit 2D. This happens. This method is called when the object is no longer, both the objects that had collided are no longer colliding or no longer touching, let's say. So on collision exit 2D is called right after the collision happens, or right after the collision ends, sorry. So in this case, here, in order to separate the two objects, I'm going to have to send our enemy player flying towards the back. What should I use for this? Wait, excuse me, I'm just thinking of a way. Please do not ask do not ask me to explain this. Uh, okay, you know what? I'll give it a try. What I've done here is I am accessing the rigid body 2D component of the enemy through the collider, the collision 2D object. Sorry, I named it collider. This is supposed to be collision 2D, not collider 2D. That's going to give you an error if you write collider 2D. So yeah, through this call variable, I'm accessing the game object, which is the enemy, and I'm also accessing the rigid body 2D component and telling it to use add force and then this thing. So let's see if this works. Actually, I don't think this should be over here. This should be in on collision enter 2D. So as soon as the collision happens, um, our enemy is going to be sent flying towards the back, and once the collision is over, then on collision exit 2D will be called, and then this if statement will be executed. It's basically going to check if the object that uh, we are not currently colliding with means we were colliding with, but not are not colliding with right now, is enemy is the enemy object or not. Let's say is not touching anymore, or has stopped touching. Let's see if this works. Okay, I got an error. What's wrong? I got 3 errors. Yes, I forgot to use new over here. Should be fine now. Yep. So pay attention to the console. Watch what happens. Okay, I'm gonna pause the game. You see four messages saying is touching enemy, because it was touching at that time and it counted at least 4 times. So probably for 4 frames it was touching. And then once that rigid body 2D dot add force method was called, once it was executed, the enemy was blown back, and so once the collision stopped, this message was given. Now you're free to experiment with this, try various things. I'd actually like to see some examples from you guys. I want to see what you guys can come up with. This is the best example that I could think of. Sorry if it didn't clear your doubts, but it's the best one that I could think of. Now, am I missing something or are we done? Nope, I think that's about it. So in this lesson we learned about collision detection. It is when two objects collide and the collision is detected by Unity, and the collision will only be detected if either one of the two objects has a rigid body 2D component attached to it. Of course, both the components should have colliders, and oh, we also learned about 3 events: on collision enter 2D, on collision stay 2D, and on collision exit 2D. We learned what they do when they are called, how to use them. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.